All right, gang, I am super excited to start things off here today because we have a brand new sponsor. It is Top Lobster. And if you don't know Top Lobster, well, you are missing out because this guy produces some of the, if not the, no, I'm going to say it, the coolest gear. I wanted to give a tip of the hat to our own store, but let's be honest, he's got the coolest Liberty gear out there. I'm wearing some right now. I got this legalized freedom hat for our video viewers at home. I also got the Scott Horton End the Wars shirt, which is freaking awesome. And there is so much more that you can find over at toplobster.com. Guys, this is a brand new sponsor. If you are a fan of this show, a supporter of this show, one of the best ways you can help us out is to support our sponsors. So I want you to go head over to toplobster.com. That is T-O-P Lobster, Lobsta.com, and just take a browse. You don't need to take my word for it. Just go check out that gear, and I guarantee you're going to find something, or probably like 10 things that you like. So he's got the coolest Liberty gear out there. We got the Reed Mises Marc shirt. We got some Scott Horton gear. We got Tom Woods gear. We got all sorts of awesome gear. He also does the designs for Joshua Smith, so you may be familiar with a lot of his artwork that he does for Break the Cycle. But he is a great guy producing awesome Liberty gear. I literally got a compliment on this legalized freedom hat from the deli counter guy today. So this is a great way to start conversations, to get people interested in these shirts. I actually had a couple people as well out at the bar last week compliment me on this shirt. They probably don't know who Scott Horton is, but they liked the End of the Wars message. So you really never know who you're going to connect with, and that's out here in Los Angeles. So please do me a favor, head over to toplobster.com, pick out a shirt or two, and you're going to want to use our discount code. That is ROAR, discount code ROAR, R-O-A-R. Head over to toplobster.com, use discount code ROAR for 10% off your order.
We need to empower people with not just the philosophical tools, but the inspiration to break free from the system.
Welcome to the flagship Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly dose of education, inspiration, and real-world application from the top minds in the liberty movement.
If you want liberty, we need to be better leaders, better husbands, better fathers, better friends, better businessmen. We need to be better people.
Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Mark Clare.
Live long and live free.
All right, kitty cats, with me today, he is the host of the Liberty Lockdown podcast, where he just passed 100 episodes. I'm very pleased to welcome Clint Russell of Liberty Lockdown. Clint, are you ready to roar?
Lions of Liberty, now hear me roar. Beat running out, but I got a bit more. Yeah, I'm ready, buddy. I've been waiting for this.
I knew you were, because that line is actually in your theme song, at least the outro, the extended cut of the theme song anyway. And I was kind of telling you this before, and I'm not just saying this to kiss your butt, because I've actually been thinking about this, because I've actually seen people talking about who has the best theme songs in the liberty movement. And, you know, a lot of libertarians, there's a lot of great podcasts out there, a lot of great content, a lot of great thought behind things. But I'd say libertarians, including maybe myself, I don't know, lack a lot of style, a lot of pizzazz. And that's one thing you bring to the table, Clint. You got style, and I really do jam to your theme song. I'm not kidding. Sometimes I'll go back and just listen to the song again after an episode, because it actually makes me jam. Maybe it's nice that you mentioned Lions of Liberty, you mentioned a bunch of other podcast friends of mine, but it's really nice that as part of your awesome theme song, you actually take the time to give shout-outs to all the podcasts, all the people that have inspired you along the way, too.
Exactly, yeah. And honestly, it began obviously as a passion project to get into the show in the first place. And I was like, well, what's a good way to market myself to all the shows that have led me down this path? So maybe they'll hear it and then they'll be like, hey, let's check this guy out. So my master plan worked out, but it's truly just a labor of love. And the fact that people enjoy it is all the better.
Well, you've been working the circuit. I mean, really working the circuit, even far outside the libertarian circuit. I mean, you were on Part of the Problem with Dave Smith, and then you also got on the Timcast, which is really amazing. Awesome. You can get those ideas in front of such a huge audience. But now you finally reached the apex, Clint. Now you're finally here.
I worked my way through all these gutter people, and now I'm on Lions of Liberty, baby. It's time.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
that was incredible.
Yeah. So, Clint, before I kind of know your story just because I've been listening to a lot of your show and I've heard you reference it a lot. For people that aren't aware of how this all started for you, I mean, I think people might know from the title of your podcast how the podcast itself got started and what that was inspired by. But I want to go back a little bit further. I want to go back to the baby Clint Russell before he was a fiery libertarian. Where did you come from politically? What were your political thoughts, and how did you end up getting this fire for liberty in your belly?
Sure. I'm a total anomaly in that I am a second gen libertarian, and
Wow.
that is
Those are
super rare. Yeah, super duper rare, especially for someone that's in their 30s. That's very rare. So, yeah, my dad, my biological dad, who didn't raise me, but I would see him one weekend a month, and he owned a nightclub that was 4 hours away. An entrepreneur. So I would get in his car, and we would have these 4-hour car rides, and he would just progressively talk to me about the foundation of the country and the founding fathers and liberty and the ideas behind it. And as a 5 and 6 year old, to have that kind of conversation is a very, very unusual thing. And
You're like, I want ice cream. What are you talking to me about this? Why aren't we talking about where we're going for ice cream?
Right.
I'm 5.
That's why I'm such an unusual person, because I got that kind of conversation as a 5-year-old. So whether that makes me better or weirder, I don't know, but it definitely it just drove it into my soul from such a young age. And then I became very anti-authoritarian, and I was always very independent. I never wanted to work for anybody else, which led me down the entrepreneur path, and that's kind of how I got here.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I was somewhat similar in that my first exposure to politics was just sitting in the car with my dad and listening to conservative talk radio, basically.
Right.
It was pretty much all he listened to, and I just absorbed it. Didn't necessarily agree or disagree. I was just kind of like taking it all in, and eventually started asking questions like, why would there be a law about this? Why would there be a law about that? But in your case, was your dad actually more of like really like a philosophical true libertarian, or was like all the way?
Yeah, like he was like a Harry Brown reader. He was I think he was a LP member. He actually ended up running for Congress in San Diego under the LP in the 90s. So yeah, he was the real deal for sure.
Awesome. Well, I guess some of these things, it's a constant question, like how much of how we act and what we believe is a product of our upbringing, and how much of it is in our genetics. And for you, it might be kind of hard to say, because if you said that dad didn't actually like raise you, but obviously you got some influence from him, but how much of that was just in there anyway? How much of that would have come out of Clint if you had never really been exposed to the actual words he was saying?
It's a really great question. I mean, I tend to believe that I was kind of built for this anyways, just because, like I said, I only spent one weekend a month with him. So it's like, you can't fully indoctrinate me. And I was getting some exposure to political conversations from my mom and my stepdad, who were really the people that were raising me. And I got to choose, I basically got to choose which ideology made sense to me from an early age. And I was also hyper competitive, very like, any sport I could play, I wanted to be the best. Like everything I did, I just wanted to be the best. So I think that that's why the idea of capitalism and meritocracy appealed to me. So I think that it's definitely a lot nurture, but also a good chunk of nature.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I wanted to believe it was a lot more like nurture. I don't know why, but because I guess I when I feel that way, when I think it's nurture, I feel that maybe it's not just my programming. Maybe there's something that I've learned along the way that had me believe a certain thing. But the more I learn about how humans work, the more I kind of feel like, man, I feel like we're all programmed from the beginning, and we're just kind of playing it out in a way. But these are the kind of conversations that we can kind of dive into a little bit more, because I think this is going to tie in actually to somewhat of what I want to talk to you about later on. Your recent show that just blew up with Cyprian, formerly Vin Armani, and Matt Erickson. We're going to dive into that in a bit, but I want to dive a little bit more into your origins, the specific origins of the Liberty Lockdown podcast itself. Obviously, you've been listening to all the best libertarian podcasts for years and years and years, as we know from your theme song, but I know what, but give me a little of the details of the story behind how the lockdowns inspired you to create this platform, to start speaking out, and to really put your all into this.
Yeah, I was, like I said, I was an entrepreneur. I worked for my family business until my late 20s. I quit working for my dad after having a fallout, and then I started my own company and did that for 8 years. up until the lockdown. And I was a private money mortgage broker. So that means that I take private investor capital and I lend it out on real estate to real borrowers. So it's real money from real investors to real borrowers. It's like classical banking, what it probably ought to be, as opposed to the Federal Reserve System where there's moral hazard and all sorts of insanity that goes along with it. So I was very successful. I was stockpiling assets. I was investing in trustees. I was investing in real estate. And I was at a position where I was nearing retirement anyways. The lockdowns come down, and basically, even though I wasn't put out of business by the state of California, I was, as a fiduciary for my investors, I could no longer in good conscience lend on real estate entering what I believed at the time to be a very imminent and severe recession that would affect the real estate market. So that was the logic behind it. I was like, okay, well, I can't do this because at the time, I didn't expect them to print $7 trillion and have a foreclosure and eviction moratorium and to do all of this insane stuff that they decided to do, which only fired me up further. So as I figure this out, as I figure out what their actual game plan is, I start thinking to myself, well, I need to warn people. I can't stand on the sideline, and even though I'm well off financially, and just let everybody else go down with the ship because they have no idea what's actually happening. So as someone who had done a podcast with two of my guy friends, which we never told a soul about, it was basically just to, stay in contact with each other. It had, 50 listeners or something. It was just our friends. So I had done that for 2 years prior. So I had some experience on the microphone. I didn't have any, idea of how good I would be at it, especially doing it on my own. So I just decided in that moment, and I guess it was about a year ago today, maybe 13 months ago now, I said, hey, I'm going to give this a shot. The name was a given. I'm a libertarian. It's about the lockdowns. It's like Liberty Lockdown. It has a alliterative vibe to it. I was like, this is just, it just felt right. So I launch, I talked to myself for a few months since no one's listening. And then I slowly start to get traction through Twitter, and the rest is history. Pete Quinones picks me up, Dave Smith, Tim Cass. It's crazy.
And you certainly, you certainly did blow up really fast. And this, some people might not realize this is not your first time on Lions of Liberty. You were actually on Electric Liberty Land a few weeks ago, along with Reed Coverdale. But before that, you were actually on a bonus show with Brian McWilliams that was for patrons only. Just another reason to be on the Patreon. It's where you get the really, really good stuff. But you and Reed were on with an incredibly drunk Brian McWilliams, but which is still one of my favorite things I think I've ever listened to in my life. But he was like kind of blown away, I guess, by how fast you and Reed were able to achieve such success. And
he was borderline displeased, let's be honest.
Borderline displeased, yes. But that's just Brian for you. But
I love Brian for
what do you attribute your very immediate success? Because I gotta say, for us, I know that period about checking the stats and feeling like 50 people are listening, because I went through that period for a while. This is back in 2013. There weren't that many libertarian podcasts out there. And the idea of listening to podcasts to learn about liberty wasn't even something on people's minds necessarily. That's why I created Lions of Liberty, because I wasn't finding the content I needed. But boy, did I have to push through a lot of time where I just felt like, is this worth it? Is this worth all the effort that I'm going through? And what kept me going through that was that the answer was always yes, because I always was getting something from the conversations I was having. And I was always really if I wasn't gaining from the process, then I probably would have flamed out a lot sooner. But it doesn't hurt when you start to see the numbers tick up. So what do you attribute the most to the ability that you had to grow so much in such a short time?
I think that there was a bit of a void when it came to absolute furious outrage at the lockdowns. Even in the libertarian podcast space, yes, there was plenty of good libertarian podcasters out there that were talking about it, saying that it was wrong. But I had such a visceral rage over it. I think that really brought my audience in. They were for the people that were most impacted by the lockdowns, because I'm in Southern California. It was vicious lockdowns here. And the fact that, I was a very successful businessman, that basically my income had been ripped away, and also, all of my faith in what this country was founded on, and what it meant, and what the people believed in, and what I thought the character of my fellow countrymen were, all of that was kind of shattered in that moment. So as I used the microphone for self-care, it was therapy, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, I know all about that.
Yeah. and it just found a vein, it just stuck into some people. And I think on the other aspect that that helps is that because I have kind of a unique business background that gives me a level of authority on topics that are valued by the libertarian community. I think that helps a lot.
You're not
too.
the guy just shouting from his mom's basement.
Right. Even though it looks like I'm in a basement, this is my garage converted office in Carlsbad on the water. It's like, this is a nice place despite appearances. But yeah, it's, I think that helps too. It added credence to what I had to say. It wasn't just some, guy in his early 20s that doesn't have a penny to his name. It was like, okay, well, you can take this guy seriously. He practiced what he preached. He did something with it. So I think that helped a lot. And then really the biggest thing that obviously put fire in this engine was Pete Quinones going on Part of the Problem. I had just debated this neocon, and it was long story, but Dave had asked about it and he had watched the video. So as Pete brings me up, Dave says, "Oh, I love that guy. He's amazing." I'm like, "I didn't even know you knew me. Like, this is incredible." And then it's off to the races from there. So it's just a wild ride.
It never hurts to connect and make friends with people who are, a little, or who are already where you want to be, and have them say good things about you. I mean, when I started getting Tom Woods on, and he played the episode that I have of his show, and he said, Mark is actually an excellent interviewer. He didn't just keep rattling off these same questions. I mean, not only did that blow up my ego, but it blew up my numbers too. So it's doing things like that and just continuing to put yourself out there. But I think one thing that you really touched on, which I think, you can connect with the right people, you can buy ads, you can do all this stuff, but you're not going to grow unless you're really, really being the truest version of yourself. And that was something that was difficult for me in the beginning, because I was really trying to be a host in the beginning. And I think anybody that goes and listens to my very, very early episodes, I don't actually recommend this, but you can tell I'm trying to put on the host voice. I feel like I have to do something different. And it's only in this honestly, probably the last couple years where I've really felt that now. Like, I used to sit here with, if you did this interview with me 5 years ago, I would have been here with a whole set of notes in front of me, because I'd be so afraid to get a lull in the conversation, or afraid to forget what I was going to say next. But the point is, you don't need to know what you're going to say next, because it's a conversation, and it's not a natural thing to have a conversation in front of a microphone, especially now. I mean, that's one of the reasons I do video interviews, is that it's so much different when you can just see the person. It's even better in person, but being able to actually see someone, interact with them. I mean, before I was just staring at like a blank computer screen or someone's like Skype name, and it's really hard to get into a conversational vibe that way, especially when you're just not used to sitting there in front of a computer doing that. Yeah,
the stars really aligned for me, because all of my podcasting influences were people that were like Joe Rogan, like all these comedy podcasts largely, that were very authentic. They were just being themselves. They were being their natural, humorous, just interested in things self. And I decided very early on that, well, if that's what appeals to me, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to be a performer. Like, this is going to be who I am and what I believe in and how I feel about things in the moment. And I don't even have a regimented schedule for my recording. So I literally come in here when I'm inspired. That's how I do it. So I think that's a really important, trick that I came up with, even though I know a lot of people believe it's important that you release on consistent days, and a lot of people do live streams, so that's not really possible. I do all of my stuff spur of the moment. I just record as soon as I'm done. I do post-production. I put it out right away. And I'm like, deal with it. I don't care. As long as the quality of it is as good as I can do, that's what I care about most. And then if you like regimented live stuff, like, maybe I'll get there someday. But at this point, I'm just most important and only doing it when I want to, because I think that as long as this doesn't feel like a job, I'll be able to deliver something that's really special.
No, I think there's definitely something to be said for that, for the ability to just hop on a mic when you're inspired. And I think one thing you mentioned before that I want to go back to, that is kind of this ties into this conversation that you recently had with Vin and Matt, or Vin, Cyprian, Matt. That when you mentioned, like, you were really successful in your business, you were able to get yourself in a financial position where you basically don't have to really work anymore. And that has given you the freedom, given you the liberty, so to speak, to put your all into this, to really put quite literally maybe everything you have into this platform, into growing this platform, into spreading those ideas. So maybe we can just dovetail right into that thing before I was even planning to, because fuck plans, right? And I don't even know where to start with this thing, because I honestly listened to an interview is really good or really thought provoking anyway when I have to listen to it twice, and when I think, damn, I wish I was the one hosting this one, but I don't, because if I was hosting, it would have been a different conversation, because we're all different in our approaches to things. But
Sure.
there's a lot of aspects of this I really want to dig into. But why don't we just start there? Because a lot of people I feel like a lot of people were offended by things that were said in this interview by both Matt and Cyprian, some of which I can totally understand. For example, if I'm Dave and I'm listening to this interview, I hear someone call me a predator, even if maybe an hour later they kind of say, I don't mean intentionally, but I'm probably going to be angry too. I'm probably going to say, fuck this guy, Yep. So I totally get that. And I totally get how fans of Dave would hear that kind of thing and be like, well, fuck this guy then, because I love Dave. I've been listening to him for years, as I have as well, as I know you have as well. And I wish him nothing but success. So to hear those kind of words used against someone that I like, that you like, that's got to actually be hard to maybe sit through like as an interviewer. I mean, what was your first, maybe you can just answer that. Like, what was your thought process when that specific word came up? Because everything else, I'm all about criticisms. I love criticisms. I love libertarians criticizing each other. I think that's how we find the truth. That's how we get to the heart of the matter. But, I think there's a point where you can actually feel like, oh, is this too far? What were you thinking at the time?
Oh, sure. Let me start by saying, I don't just like Dave. I love Dave. I think he's an amazing person. I think he's he's an unbelievable messenger. I have a tremendous amount of faith in him. So yes, for anybody that saw me sit there quietly as my hero was torn to shreds, whatever you thought my emotion was in that moment, you read it correctly. I was not pleased with the character assassination, and I did push back later on where I said, because Vin or Cyprian and Matt were both saying, no, they like Dave. They want the best for Dave, but we're all predators and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, look, it's a very different thing to say that we're predators if you're talking about prey, if you're talking about food, if you're talking about us being, the top of the food chain. It's a much different thing to say that he's a predator to other human beings. That's cannibalistic. That's definitely a moral judgment on him. And it's also assessing his motives in a way that I don't think, first off, I don't think you're correct. And secondarily, I don't think that you know him well enough to know actually what's in his heart. And I don't appreciate people assuming that they know someone's heart when they don't even know him as well as I do. And I don't know Dave well enough to know for sure what's in his heart, but he has been a very consistent messenger on every platform I've ever seen for 6 or 7 years now. So for him to be doing this as an act would be astonishing. So anyways, I say all that to say this. I think that the reason I'm able to stay calm in that moment is because I still think there's merit to their arguments. I think that it's a good thought experiment. It's necessary that we do harshly, judge the people that we are entrusting with significant power. So I didn't mind it in that sense, but I just when it edges into character assassination, I think that it's, unless you have hard evidence of what you're trying to allege, I think that's very uncouth.
Because like later on, Vin was trying to kind of say, when you gave him a little pushback on that he wasn't saying that he was necessarily judging Dave's character. He was, and him and Matt were both kind of trying to say the same thing in a way. And I'm not carrying water for either of them. I want to be really clear. My thing is, when I hear conversations like this, conversations that kind of shake me out of my stupor a little bit, and where I'm like, well, what did I just hear? And I have to go back and listen again. I always try to do my best to steel man what people are saying, no matter what they are. Even if I already agree or don't agree, I want to try to take the best of what I think they're saying, not assume the worst of what I think they're saying. Now, if you wanted to assume the worst about Vin or Matt, both of whom, between the two of them, I spent 5, 6, 7 hours talking to both of them on a number of different podcasts. And you can assume that they're just going after Dave in order to gain followers and get more likes and subscribes and smash that like button or what have you to grow their platforms, which would actually be pretty ironic, since their big criticism is that Dave is his goal is to grow his platforms.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong. They could just be entirely doing this, entirely going after Dave, specifically because they want to get more followers, more likes, more listens. That's totally possible. So I'm not going to discount that possibility, but I personally don't believe that, having interacted with them a decent amount anyway. I do think that they come from a place where they are trying to get a message to people about a different path to walk than the political one or than this LPMC political one. So before we dive more into that, why don't I just kind of get you to, just because I know not everybody here necessarily heard that interview, I do recommend everyone go and listen to Liberty Lockdown episode 100. I will post that in today's show notes over at lionsliberty.com. But if you could just kind of recap what your personal thoughts are about the Mises Caucus approach, the Mises Caucus strategy. I know you're supporting Dave in this mission. So just what are your thoughts about the entire approach, and why do you think that this is a good approach for libertarians to take? I don't know if you would necessarily say it's what all good libertarians should focus on, but it's what you are definitely focusing on. So what is your thought process behind that?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that I agree with you. I don't think that Matt and Cyprian are doing this exclusively to get, the clout chasing or whatever. I think they are true believers. I do also think that they are picking on the top dog because they know it's going to bring eyeballs and ears to their ideas, and that's not an accident. And
Sure.
and I even watched Matt's stream after he came on my show and the whole thing went viral and blew up, that he said as much. He's admitting that, yeah, of course, like because these guys are true believers, they want to get people to consider the counter argument. What better way to consider the counter argument than to get people to go, I don't like this guy, I'm going to go listen to his show and, see why he's so wrong, so I can find some other clip to go viral or something stupid like that. And then they get to hear his ideas. So I see the logic behind it. I don't think it's necessarily, wrong or evil or anything like that, but I think there are two layers to it. So now I'll answer your original question, which is that I came in, obviously I was a libertarian from a younger age than most people, but my inspiration that we actually could prevail with a libertarian worldview came through the Ron Paul moment. And that only happens by having a passionate, principled libertarian speaker on the biggest stages, reaching millions of people that would otherwise not hear our ideas. And, I still believe that this country, especially after lockdowns, is as ripe as it has probably ever been to have a Ron Paul version 2.0. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no better person on this planet for that mission than Dave Smith. That's what I believe. So, to their pushback as to whether or not political action, or if you're going to be involved in politics, as Matt believes, it should be through the RNC. They're all fair counter arguments. Like that's the other reason I didn't cut them off or scream at them, is that I think that this is a genuine critique. Here's the truth. We have been fighting my entire life, for far longer than I've been alive, to be honest, to try and maintain the liberty that we were blessed with from our foundation. And we have lost it year after year, decade after decade, century after century, and nothing has stemmed the tide. So if anyone wants to get on the mic and pretend as if they have complete certitude as to how to address this problem, I'm sorry, you need to have a little bit more humility. I really believe that. And I think that that's probably my biggest critique for Cyprian and Matt, is that they have a level of certitude that comes off as egotistical, and I think that it's a little bit misguided and it's off-putting. Now, keeping in mind, they don't care about that, and they don't want to save everybody like I do. Yeah, they don't, and they're very happy with alienating a huge swath of the population, and that's okay. Like, again, everyone has their own different path. My belief is that we should be doing what we're best at. Dave is great at what he does. I don't know why you would tear him down. I think that's a mistake. And that's what I don't like about their path, is that their path is like, this is the only way. This is the only way we can get to any level of salvation. I'm like, well, I hope you're right. And I wish you well. I'm not going to tear you down, because I think the agorist path and growing the society and the community that we hope to see in the world makes a ton of sense. And I also believe in Matt's idea of like, stop bitching about stuff and go out and make some money, be an inspirational person, stand up high and represent your beliefs in a way that's appealing so that you can sell it better. That's a great message. I totally agree with it. And then I love Dave's principles as well. So it's like, just let everybody, like, if we're all headed in the same direction, why are we tearing each other down? I just think it's a huge mistake.
All right, guys, I got to take a quick break to tell you about our newest sponsor, and that is our good friend, the man himself, Top Lobster. This guy produces the most amazing, most original, most graphically pleasing Liberty gear you're going to find anywhere. I personally have the Legalized Freedom hat. I have the Scott Horton End the Wars shirt. I also have a Disobey Your Local Tyrant with Gavin Newsom on it that Top Lobster sent me as well, personalized just for me. You are not going to find cooler Liberty gear anywhere. So right now, if you are a fan of this show, I want you to support our sponsors. You need to head over, stop this very podcast, head over to Top Lobster, that's Lobster, LOBSTA.com. Browse everything over there. I guarantee you're going to find something you love. And then all you got to do is use discount code ROAR for 10% off your order. That's discount code ROAR for a smooth 10% off. Everybody wins. You get cool gear. You get to support a sponsor. That sponsor supports us. This is how the free market works, my friends. So please head over to toplobster.com and don't forget to use discount code ROAR for 10% off your order. Yeah, I think, and I'm not trying to carry water for Matt or Vin, but again, I just try to see everything from the perspectives. I think from their perspectives, they actually see the path not just as not the best one, or not just as, you could take a better path. I think they actively see it as a dangerous path. And whether you agree or not, if you do see something as dangerous and you do care about the people involved and you do share some kind of kinship or camaraderie or brotherhood in some way with what you might call like the greater libertarian community, the Ron Paul people, us, whatever you want to say, sure, then I can understand. Like if I truly believe that, I might be doing the same thing, trying to sound the alarm, trying to be the Paul Revere and say, no, this is the dangerous path. And I think that's what a lot of people, I think, are having trouble seeing, that if you could think something is dangerous and try to point out the fire, and then people might get mad at you for pointing out the fire. And I'm not saying that the fire is there. I don't know if the fire is going to be there or not. I very much approach this as just as I approach all the debates, all the people that come to this platform to have debates. Yeah, a lot of times I have opinions about it, but I oftentimes really don't have a completely defined opinion when I come to some of these things. I actually am just there to have the front row seat. What better way to have a front row seat than to actually host these conversations on the platform? You
and me both, brother. I feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So I know, but yeah, I guess, do you think that there's any legitimacy? Because maybe we can take this back to, because I want to talk about something that you started that episode talking about, and that was your concept of martyrdom. And I don't want to, split hairs about what the definition of martyrdom may or may not be.
We already did that for an hour on that episode. You should probably skip to the second hour anyways.
Yeah, you can go listen to all that conversation on Liberty Lockdown. But just, I want to understand your viewpoint of what you were trying to say in terms of being willing to take a martyr's path. I think that those are the words you would use. So you just describe exactly what you mean by that.
Sure. I think that if you envision, especially if you envision, what's interesting about this is I think that Matt, Cyprian, and myself all view the same danger. We all see the same hazards in our path here. So I was just trying to express to them that I'm doing this with eyes wide open. I know that putting my name on a show where I talk negatively about the largest government in human history is dangerous. I understand their concern in having other people follow this path without their eyes opened. If they think that they can just be political dissidents and push back against this government without risking something, I think it's important for people to understand that yes, you are risking something, because that's the nature of tyrannical governments. And I think that we are on the cusp of one. I certainly think you could argue that we just existed under.
I'd say we're beyond the cusp, my friend.
Right, exactly. But I'm just saying in terms of harsh prosecution of anybody that gets, this isn't China yet. You can still get on the mic and talk shit about the government.
Right. And the fact that we can have this conversation right now and neither of us are worried that someone's going to bust in this door does say a lot to the fact that we do still have a kind of freedom that people that truly lived under really, really tyrannical regimes did not have.
Yeah, and they wouldn't even consider to do what we're doing right now. They probably wouldn't even do it in the privacy of their own home because they'd assume that they're being tapped. So we're on our way there. My belief is that because I see us on that path, I want to take a stand now. And that's what I mean by the martyr's path. I am willing to risk my life to get these messages out to people. That's the truth. And if I have to sacrifice my life, that's okay, because I am not willing to be a slave. So that's all there is to it. And I think that it's important that if more people are willing to do what I'm doing, put your name on it, tell the truth, say politically incorrect stuff at work, like risk something here. If we were to all stand up, like we always talk about the silent majority, that most people don't like cancel culture. Most people don't like the trajectory of the government. And yet no one has the courage to actually vocalize it. And I'm like, when are we going to turn the tide? If it's just me and a handful of radicals on the internet that are doing this, the tide isn't going to turn. This is going to take the common man. I mean, not to say that I'm not a common man. I'm just saying it's going to take people in their day-to-day lives to do this similar things and to have courage and to actually vocalize their displeasure with what the hell's going on in this world. So that's the reason that I use that term, and I stand by it. I think that despite all of the the finagling we did on the definition, I still think
I'm the guy that loves like finagling. Like I love that part of like I could listen to 40 minutes of people just like debating what martyrdom is. So for me, it's great, but not everybody does love that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I take their point seriously that it's the implication is that your death only becomes officially a martyrdom if it's inspirational to other people. Well, okay, then that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to be inspirational to other people, like whether or not my death will matter. And for the record, I have no death wish. I do not wish to die by the state.
You should get it on the record now. Clint is not suicidal as well.
Not suicidal. Don't want to die. Don't want to be killed by the government. Like, don't want any of that. But it's a risk that I'm aware is presented to me, and I'm passionate about these ideas, and I just hope that I can inspire a few more people to do similar things, to have some courage to stand up for this stuff before it becomes so precarious that no one can. And once that happens, it's too late. So, clock's ticking.
So when you say you're willing to risk your life, do you just mean that you understand that the risks of being this vocal, especially in these times, the way that it's very obvious, I think, the way things are going to anyone that has their eyes open. That's one reason I do take a lot of what Vin says seriously, because he was calling a lot of things back in March, like before we even had lockdowns. He was calling a lot of things that have happened.
He's amazing.
So to me, when you show me that, when I can look at, when you have the receipts, I'm going to at least listen to you. I'm going to at least take you seriously. Now I might disagree. I might not like the approach, what have you, but I'm going to take it seriously. But do you think that are you just speaking in terms of like, in terms of keep saying the truth, it's keeping your voice out there, refusing to, do anything but that, or do anything but put the truth out there, as opposed to like actually physically going out somewhere and putting yourself in the line of fire, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, if it comes to it, and we have to do that, then yeah, I'm willing to. But I don't think we're there yet, and I certainly hope that we can not go there. I don't think that that's a fate or a future that would be hopeful at all. My hope is that in having courage now, while we still can, while we can stand up and risk something, but it's really just like, it's financial risk to a large extent. It's losing your job. It's doing things like that. It's not so much imprisonment and, black bagging and CIA stuff yet.
Might be worse, because if they can turn off your bank account, turn off, unperson you, take you down from social media, which in nowadays really is the community. Like you kind of are unpersoned when you're taken off social media.
You're right.
Those might be less physically harmful, but I don't know, if you can't get your bank account and you can't bank, I mean, that's pretty much going to destroy your life.
You're right, and I'm not downplaying the risk, but my point in all this is that because we are right on the precipice of that, do it now, because once you get there, there's no turning that back without violence. So like as someone who doesn't want violence, I think that it's important that we do it now. We should have done it years ago. We should have done it at the day one of lockdowns. At the very latest, we should have been doing it. But since we're here, there's no better time than now. Like if you have the opportunity, if you have the resources to take this risk like I'm doing, certainly you should be doing it if you have these same beliefs. If you don't have the resources, or if you have a family you have to look after, I'm not encouraging you to risk everything and to jeopardize your family. There are priorities that come first. I am a single man who doesn't have children, who has a lot of money. What excuse do I have? I have
Sounds
none.
like a dangerous man. Good dangerous.
Yeah, right. So I have no excuse is the point, though. And that's why, I hope that more people will follow in my path, become financially free, and then stand up for yourself too, kind of along the same lines of what Matt was pushing. So that's why I don't disagree with these guys. I think that they, like, my opinion is all three of them, including Dave, have a picture of the portrait of the solution. Like they're painting it for us. And I just wish that instead of everybody looking at each other like, well, we all see the same problem, but we all have a different answer. So you're fucking stupid and wrong and evil and dangerous. Stop with that. Like, no, we have so many actual enemies. There's a couple of them up in Washington. I don't know if you've heard about them. It's, Congress. So what are we doing here? That's all I'm saying.
Here's one thing that's really got me thinking from that conversation and generally what's gone on here, because I have never been a official supporter or official member of the Mises Caucus or anything. I've always tried to maintain not an air, like not an air of neutrality, like actual neutrality. Like I really just, I want liberty for everybody, and I want more people to be open to these ideas, and I'm happy for anyone that's doing it their own way. If their own way is like getting ballot signatures and knocking on doors and that's opening people up in some path, I'm totally good with that. If your way is being more of a Ron Paul style, focusing on ending the Fed, ending the wars, and doing that through like a political caucus like the LPMC, I'm good with that too. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't feel a kinship with people in the Mises Caucus, with many of the people that I know personally, because they're my people. Like, they were inspired by Ron Paul. They care about these huge issues that actually affect people's lives each and every day. They care about the fact that people overseas are being killed with our tax dollars every single day. They care that people are being put in jail for completely victimless crimes, for owning plants. And these are the things they focus on. And so I do feel that kinship, and I want that message to resonate with people. The thing that has really specifically got me thinking from this conversation is something that Matt brought up, that I had never really thought of things in this way before. But this concept that by opposing the state strongly and putting yourself out there and opposing the state, by attempting to limit the government, you're actually causing the government to become more tyrannical. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying it's an interesting concept that I had never really wrapped my head around. And when you use that filter, if you accept his premise and you then look at the LPMC, and if you think they're not going to be successful, we probably don't need to care. This probably doesn't matter at all. It's fine. But I actually kind of agree with what Matt and Vin were both saying, that I think they are going to be successful in terms of taking over the Libertarian Party. I think the writing is on the wall as far as that, and it's only 2021 right now. And I think if Dave does want to be the Libertarian Party nominee, 4 years ago, he probably wouldn't have gotten it. But I think by the time we get there, with all the energy that's pouring in through the Mises Caucus, I think it's his for the taking, ultimately. And I think he is going to get on much bigger platforms. I mean, and there's no doubt about that. What worries me is kind of what Matt and Vin both brought up, but the idea that are we all painting, or not we, but whoever, the Mises Caucus, anybody who's involved in this wing of the political movement, and it's already begun. You've already seen some articles about it. That the LPMC is relating them directly to the bougie boys, and relating that to domestic terrorism, white nationalism. Is there a danger? And I'm not saying that even if like you seem to really understand that danger and you're going into it with eyes wide open, like you said, I'm worried about people that might not really understand the danger, that actually just think they're in this for a good time, that are actually just shitposting on the internet for 10 hours a week and might not realize what they could potentially, because the success is actually where the danger is here. If there's more success, there's much more danger. If this is actually a real threat ever, if Dave Smith is a real threat ever, I'm worried about the kinds of things that could happen to people that might not be aware could happen to them. And that doesn't mean don't do it, but it just means be aware.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I'm not trying to downplay the risk. However, I do think that there's a compelling counter argument to this, is that if you believe that the risk comes with success, your defense also comes with success, because as you grow the numbers, you become more of a force that might be left alone. If we're gonna pretend that we're all gonna just like go our separate ways and go underground, like, you're accepting your fate of living that way for basically the rest of your life. Like, that's how I view this. So I'm not willing to accept that. I don't want to live in a country where I have to be quiet about my political beliefs and just accept whatever tyrannical bullshit they roll out. Like, no. So maybe it's hubris, maybe it's overconfidence, maybe it's just stubbornness. But my answer to tyranny in this moment is no. I'm not going to accept any more of it. So, for those that feel that way, that don't want to leave the country to find, less tyrannical places to live, and God bless you if you have the resources to do that. I stand here and I stay here and I fight for the people that can't do that.
And you say this is someone that definitely does have the resources to do that. You could probably take off. I mean, if you could retire in the U.S., you can definitely retire south of the border and in about 100 other places too.
100%. Yeah, I absolutely could. But here's the truth. I'm not in this for myself. Like as much as I am in it for myself, I'm more in it for my friends, my family, the principles of liberty on this planet. I mean, it is really precarious. Like we had global lockdowns. Think about that. Could you have ever fathomed such a thing when we were growing up? I certainly couldn't. So
About
my
10 years
answer
ago,
to
that was wacky Alex Jones stuff.
it was insane. I mean, even if Alex said it, which I like Alex a lot, I would have been like, okay, you're wrong here. Definitely got that one wrong.
Oh, he
So
did.
now
He
that
was
we've seen
saying this stuff like 2007, 2008, and I was like, all right, this guy's probably going overboard here. And
Well,
he was for 2007, but he wasn't for 2021.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember. I mean, the FEMA camps, and yeah. I remember his his warnings, and I still think that many of them are sincere and serious. But anyways, point being is that you see global lockdowns. That to me implies there is no safe place, so safe space or whatever you want to call it. Like God bless Cyprian and Cypran. For now, he is more free than we are. I'm not sure.
Hard to deny that.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that if we don't take a stand at some point and just simply say no and mean it and just say we outnumber you. So what are you going to do? You're going to arrest us all? You're going to have us build the prisons to put us in? Like I just hope that by having a Ron Paul 2.0 moment, we can have 20 million people and we can go create the great state of Florida or the great country of Florida. Like that would be a much better future, in my opinion, than just allowing this to persist.
I guess that's what this comes down to ultimately. If you really think it's just a matter of getting in front of enough people, like if it's just that enough people haven't heard of the ideas, then maybe all we have to do, and that makes perfect sense then maybe all we have to do is get someone like Dave Smith who does connect. I mean, I saw tons of people saying, I didn't understand libertarianism until I saw Dave on Joe Rogan, and now I'm all in. But I guess the question is, so where does all this go? Even if Dave wins the nomination and generates excitement, like where does it all go? And there, what Matt and Cyprian both seem to believe is that Dave won't become president, and I think we all pretty much know that. But that it's going to leave a void there. There's going to be a void there when that fails. I don't know how much I agree with that, because I think most people supporting Dave, at least right now, this might change if he gets more general population support. I think most people that support him at this stage, like you yourself, aren't supporting him to become president, because no one thinks that's possible. But if if his popularity really grows and grows and grows, which I truly think it can, because I think he has so much charisma, he's so well spoken on the issues, he really does represent liberty in the way I want it represented. So I want him to have the success. I want him to do well. I just don't know where it all goes. Like, what does happen? What happened with the Ron Paul movement? Well, you got a bunch of podcasts. You got a whole bunch of podcasts out of it. So maybe we'll get even more podcasts or something better. But
all those podcasts matter. I mean, as silly as it sounds, I speak to 5,000 to 10,000 people every time I hit record. Like that's important, and I'm sure you guys do the same. Dave speaks to 6 figures every time he hits record. Like, these are important things. And then he goes on Rogan and he speaks to 10 million people, especially across the globe. I mean, there is an incredible capacity for reach that didn't exist during the Ron Paul era. So as to the question of what happens to his supporters when he fails to become president, I don't think that matters. I mean, the argument that they're going to end up becoming some sort of like radicalized fringe movement, none of us from the 2008 period did that. Even after our Lord,
I don't know about none of us. That Cantwell fella kind of did, but for the most part.
Okay. I mean, I'm saying it's a very small minority, and oftentimes those people are on that trajectory anyway. So like, they're going to do what they're going to do. But
you could see it in his writing like 8 years before, if you were, you got the vibe. I got the reason I never invited that guy on my show, even when he was writing purely libertarian stuff, it's because I got that vibe. I got the icky vibe from him.
Exactly. So
I don't want to touch icky stuff.
My point is, I do not think that. I think the risk is far overstated, and I think that the upside to him waking up another 5 or 10 million new people, or just reigniting the flame. Like, the truth is, there's still a huge amount of the people that were big time Ron Paul supporters that all abandoned the LP because it got woke and stupid, and now they're seeing a guy who's coming back with Ron Paul's almost exact outlook, but with a younger, more fiery approach to it. I think that in this era, that matters a lot. Like, Dave will say politically incorrect stuff. He'll use profanity. He will actually engage the youth. And like, if you believe at all in actually having an American nation that will be worth living in our lifetimes, it's vitally important we reach the youth in this country. And Dave can do that. I mean, even on the political stage, he can do that because he is so young. I mean, he's going to appeal to a lot of people. Legion of Skanks, he's already got a built-in, very young audience. If you go on Rogan, you're going to talk to, 10 million young Americans in this country. These are really big things. So I'm not willing to give up yet. I think that's really the end of the message here, is that, like, I think that, is it dire? Yes. But it's not hopeless. And I think that there is a worthwhile Hail Mary, as Dave repeatedly describes it. Like, let's throw some, man. Let's see what we can do here.
All right, guys, before we wrap up here, I got to let you know about one of our great sponsors, our longtime sponsors at Lorenzotti, Italy. If you are a fan of coffee, if you like a nice fresh cup of joe to wake up in the morning, as I do, you're going to want to check out our friends at Lorenzotti, Italy. They deliver fine, premium Italian coffees right to your door in these nice little tins that look so wonderful sitting on your counter there. And if that weren't all enough, these guys are great libertarians. They are Patreon supporters of this show. They are absolutely worthy of your support. If that all wasn't enough, these guys do more than just sell coffee. They also help other entrepreneurs set up their own coffee businesses, help them acquire equipment, acquire financing, everything they need to start their own coffee business, start their own coffee shops. So you definitely want to check them out for that reason, if that's something that's been on your mind. Either way, just fantastic people at Lorenzotti, Italy. Amazing people, fantastic people. You'll want to support them if you're fans of the show. Heck, even if you're not, if you're listening to this by accident, check them out anyway. They have great coffee. Lorenzotti, Italy. You can find them at lorenzotti.coffee. That's LORENZOTTI.coffee. And you do not want to forget your Lions of Liberty listener discount. Just use discount code ROAR for 10% off your order. Do you foresee a point, or I'm just kind of curious how you see your own life potentially playing out here, like depending on what goes on politically here in the next couple of years, do you see a point where you might just say, all right, I was wrong. Like, this is bad. I got to get out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's if we end up in a hot civil war, I have no interest in fighting between MAGA and, Blue Anon. Like, that sounds like an absolute nightmare, because I don't want either of those people to rule over me. I'm an ANCAP. I don't even want this political structure to continue to persist. So, right. No, I'm not interested in fighting a war for any of these sides that would likely be the dominant forces in these wars. So yeah, I would leave the country if it came to that. And at that point, my family and friends might be more interested in following me, as opposed to nowadays, when they're still, like, even after being locked down in Southern California for a year, they still don't want to leave. So, things aren't that bad yet. I think that's the truth, is that as long as people have food on the table, they're not going to want to really uproot their life to go find greener pastures. So, but we're not there yet. So let's hope we don't get there. But yes, I agree that it's probable in our lifetimes.
I mean, I think that's such an important point, because you and I see the lockdowns and we see tyranny, because it is tyrannical. It's unquestionably tyrannical. But that's not what our neighbors all necessarily see. It's not what our families all necessarily see. Our families are, when they're locked down, most people in the U.S., at least the vast majority of people I know here out in Los Angeles anyway, for them, a lockdown just meant watching Netflix, getting a paycheck from somewhere. Sometimes it was an employer, sometimes the government, sometimes a little of both, watching TV, hanging out, doing your yoga. Like, no one feels really that oppressed from it. Even when people started to get sick of the lockdowns, all they did was just start going to other people's houses. Even the people even friends of mine that were masking it up and not going anywhere for 2 weeks, after 2 or 3 months, they're all hanging out with people. They're all going to kind of like, house gatherings and that sort of thing. So it never really felt like real oppression.
Right.
It did to us because we
tyranny.
see it. Right. Yeah. And but so that's what I wondered too. I mean, I don't know. Was this, because I feel like this was just like, this was not the tyranny. This was like the test run. This was like, let's see how much we can push this thing here. And it turns out we can push it pretty freaking far, at least in certain areas. Whereas other areas might resist more. And that kind of ties into something. I think you mentioned this on the same episode, might have been another episode, but that you really think people in the United States should begin moving to more geographic areas where people are, more inclined to our sort of beliefs, even if they're not pure libertarians, because they're a little more harder to find. But what are your thoughts and plans as far as that particular strategy? I know you're taking off in a couple of weeks, but are you just gonna kind of? I think you got a van, is that right? Or
I was gonna do an RV. I decided after looking into costs and everything, I was like, no, I'm just gonna drive and figure it out. I'll stay in Airbnbs and stuff. It was gonna be like
Nice.
$225,000 to get the whole rig and everything I wanted to do. And I was like, well, if my show takes off, maybe I'll do that a year from now. But for now, if I'm gonna retire, I don't want to be spending that kind of money on an RV. Anyways, so yes, my belief is that it makes a ton of sense for us to be galvanizing geographically. I think it's a huge mistake for people to stay behind enemy lines. And let's just be honest, states like California, states like New York are lost. Like, you're not gonna win that back. And by loss, I don't mean, oh, you get a Republican in there and that could fix it, and that's not gonna happen, and that's my complaint. No, I'm saying like budgetary level, tyranny level, like you're not gonna vote in what's her name?
Caitlin.
Yeah. And have everything get
maybe Jeff
rectified.
Hewitt, maybe our boy Jeff Hewitt. But
well, yeah, and I've had Jeff on my show, and I think the world of him. But this is kind of like the Dave Smith argument. What are the odds that he actually wins? So we'll see. But anyways, point being is that I think that you need to be around people, whether they're whatever their belief system is, as long as they believe that they oppose tyranny and they are armed. You need to represent a defensive threat. And that's all I'm looking for in my personal life, is I want to go be around people that value liberty over security and yet are armed as if they are very concerned about their security. That's what I'm looking for. So if I can find that community, again, I'm a peaceful person. I have no interest in fighting the government. Let me just make that crystal clear. However, if I want to live freely and oppose tyranny without having to fight, I need to represent a daunting task when it comes to taking out my community. So that's what I would like to see more people do.
Yeah, this just comes back to the same idea, and I think this is something else that Matt brought up when you guys were talking, is that the idea that most people don't want liberty. Like, we're here selling this liberty thing, and for so long I really thought, oh no, it's just that we need to wake more people up. I mean, that's really all I ever thought, because it happened to me. But when I think back, Vin said something that was pretty. I'm not even sure if this was in your podcast or on Twitter. Everything's kind of fading together to me now.
Sure.
But he said something to the effect of, like, Ron Paul didn't wake him up. He actually just sold him something he already wanted. He was already living this life. He was already living a more free life. He just heard someone that sort of coalesced it together for him, and that kind of inspired him. For me, I had actually already been a libertarian before Ron Paul's campaign, partially because of Ron Paul. I actually read his writing like 10 years earlier, as well as Harry Brown and some other influences. But what Ron Paul's campaign did do was inspire me to speak out. And maybe that's where the real value is in Dave Smith's campaign or whatever we're doing out here in our podcast, because that's why I started this podcast. I wanted to inspire people to speak out, because before it was just libertarianism or having whatever political thoughts I might have. It was just a hobby to me. I read books on my own. I read articles on my own and talked to anybody about this stuff. It was just something in my head, something I did. And then when I saw Ron Paul out there literally saying the things that had been on my mind for years, but saying them on national TV to the shock and appall and horror of like guys like Mitt Romney and John McCain, like, and just seeing him being mocked, literally mocked by the impartial, quote unquote, air quotes for those not watching the video, hosts of these debates. That's what inspired me. Seeing the bravery and boldness in the face of adversity, in the face of being completely mocked. So I don't know if that can be recreated, maybe that's not what we're trying to do, recreate it necessarily. Maybe we're trying to create something entirely new. I wish it success, but I, like you, want people to go into everything with their eyes open. And I kind of agree with part of the message. Like, I'm back and forth on all this stuff. I'm working this stuff out live, just like I know you were during the interview. But like, I think there is something to be said for if you're 25 years old and you don't make a lot of money and you're not in a good financial position. There's something to be said that maybe you shouldn't spend 20 hours a week like working in a Mises Caucus. Maybe you should actually be spending more of your time trying to build up your own skill set, trying to build your own wealth, trying to do the things that will get you in a better position in your own life. And then again, maybe if you're like Clint and you're pretty much set, maybe you go balls to the wall and all that stuff. So I think it all comes down to an individual situation, but I do think it is something people should consider. Some people should not dismiss this idea that you should get wealthier to have more influence and more power, not to just coin the whole Jason Stapleton show. But there's truth to that. There is absolute truth to that, and you right here are evidence of it. You have the freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have that freedom because you put yourself in such a great position beforehand.
Exactly, and the reason I did that is largely because I was inspired by the Ron Paul revolution, because I was like, I see tyranny coming. I understand Austrian economics, so I can apply that to my analysis of risk when it comes to investing in real estate, which is almost completely predicated on Federal Reserve policy. And It was just, I utilized all of this knowledge in a way that actually benefited my life. So like, I am not at all dismissing the value of it. I think there's a huge mistake that people do not apply this knowledge. They read about it and they read about it and they read about it. They don't do anything about it. It's like, look, once you got these ideas, use them. They're powerful as hell. We understand monetary policy and the boom bust cycle better than 95+% of all investors in the market. If you can't use that information to your advantage, you're fucking up. You're making a huge mistake. So like, yes, I agree. Matt's got a great idea there. And I think that that's really important, but let's be honest. Not everyone has business acumen. Not everyone is driven by money either. Like I wish more of us were, but not all of us are. And it's okay. Like that's okay if you're not. So if you're passionate and you want to volunteer your time to the Mises Caucus, I think that's a great use of your time too. If you don't want to pursue wealth accumulation and things like that, or if it's just not in your skill set, like this is what I keep going back to. Use what you're best at to help head us in the same, similar direction. I think that at the end of the day, that creates a much better world for all of us.
All right, Clint. Well, it's been awesome talking to you. Awesome finally meeting you, Elisa, on Zoom and hopefully in person one day here. But it's been great getting to know you. Of course, I'll let you give the wrap up here. All the ways people can find Liberty Lockdown. My listeners are pretty smart. I think they can figure it out. But let them know where they can find your show and how they can tell them, send it whatever message you want to send to the kitty cats.
I'll be very quick. At Liberty Lock Pod on Twitter, Liberty Lockdown on Instagram, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, everywhere else. I really appreciate you guys having me on. It checks yet another box off of my intro outro music. And
you got to be close now, huh?
I just have Tom Woods and Michael Malice and Eric July. Those are the last three I need. So if you're listening,
and they're all listening right now, I know that.
I need you guys. Come on.
All right, Clint. Thanks so much, man. Keep up the great work. Keep on roaring. I know you will.
Thanks, brother.
Live long and live free.